What are the dietary guidelines for America, and why should you care? More importantly, what the is beef tallow? Hi, I'm Jason Pearson. I'm a personal trainer, and this week I want to talk about the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. This is a document that comes out every 5 years. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans is an essential resource for health professionals and policymakers as they design and implement food and nutrition programs that feed the American people, like school lunches and things like that. And it's also there to help Americans make healthy choices for themselves and their families. So for the most part, most people don't really need to know about these, I guess, but they are used to create policies, especially for schools and school food programs. So it's not something that we should be oblivious to, especially if we have children. This is important because this is policymakers saying what our children should or should not eat when they're in school. Why am I even talking about this now? This document's been out since last year. So what? Well, I heard a podcast earlier this week. It was the Rich Roll podcast. He was talking with Simon Hill about nutrition, and he was specifically talking about these new American guidelines, and specifically talking about some of the issues with these new American guidelines. So every 5 years, this document is changed based on who's in charge and based on new research that has happened. So essentially, the document comes out, and immediately a new panel is put together to examine evidence. New evidence is coming out, stuff they might have missed the last time, and then put together a series of recommendations. So the scientists put together recommendations, they give it to the policymakers then write the document itself. So they might not use all the research, they might cherry pick the research, they might, they're going to do what they want to do with the research, obviously, but they get all this research. An earlier version of this document, before 2025, is 110 pages long. It's designed for people that are making these programs for schools and things, so it's not supposed to be simple, right? But it's also broken down in such a way that you can just go to a summary and get the basic gist of what they want you to do without having to read 110 pages. Now, again, most of the 110 pages is citation, so the actual bulk of it's probably only about 50 pages maybe, and even that is broken into sections. There's appendices about people with diabetes and different age groups and things like that. Based on the suggestions of this podcast, I looked at the Canadian version of this, the Finnish version of this, and the Japanese version of this, sort of. I had to see a summary of that because I don't speak Japanese, or read Japanese for that matter. The Canadian document is 62 pages long, also mostly citations. The Finnish document, I didn't see the actual document, but I saw a website, and it is also very long and has a lot of citations in it. Okay, so this new American document is, ready for this? 10 pages long. Okay, easy to digest, right? And the reason it's 10 pages long is there are no citations anywhere in it. None. That's not 100% true. In the introductory letter from the secretaries, there are 4 footnotes that are linked. And if you follow them, they go to the CDC, and they don't tell you a whole lot that's not actually in the document itself. But the rest of the document, there's no mention of scientists. There's no mention of where they got the information from. So from my understanding, the panel was created after the last one came out, and then when the new secretary came in, he decided he didn't like those people and he got rid of them, got a whole new panel together and said, come up with something. Now, the first panel had been working for years. This panel had months. They did what they could do, and of course, these are nutrition scientists anyway, so it's not like they were just jumping in from nothing. But they came up with a series of recommendations, gave it to the department, and the department didn't like those, didn't use them, and came up with their own thing, based a little bit on what they said. But the reason there's no science in here is because they rejected the science, is what it comes down to. But here's the good thing about this document. The message is simple: eat real food. And that's great. That is a great statement to make. It makes a pretty bold claim here as well. These guidelines mark the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in our nation's history. And I guess the most significant reset is that they're not using science. I don't know what that means. Most of the stuff that I read in here is not a whole lot different from what Canada says, what Finland says, and what the previous American documents say. Most of it. Here's where all these documents agree. People are unhealthy record numbers. People are obese in record numbers. And a lot of that has to do with how they're eating. And people are eating too much processed food. The other thing that all these documents agree on is we need to reduce saturated fat, we need to reduce sugar intake, and we need to reduce sodium intake as well. Those three things are across all these documents, and they are what nutrition science has been saying for decades. Here's the thing, nutrition science changes constantly, which is a good thing. I mean, science should change. You should be able to go into something and say, I'm not sure I quite trust this data. Let me redo the experiment. Let me come up with a new experiment and find new ways of looking at things. But there are some things that are constants. Reducing saturated fat, reducing sodium, reducing sugars are all ways that have been a constant for a while. The new document is on point with these things. This is from the newest DGA. In general, saturated fat consumption should not exceed 10% of total daily calories. But here's an interesting sentence. The only thing that talks about science at all in this entire document. More high-quality research is needed to determine which types of dietary fats best support long-term health. Sure, I mean, like I said, it's always changing, but there's really good evidence that saturated fat is bad. And in fact, it says here, saturated fat is bad. So why is that sentence there? Because this document, unlike the rest of them, and unlike previous US documents, focuses on eating red meat and full-fat dairy. One serving of red meat will give you enough saturated fat to last 3 or 4 days. So red meat, full-fat milk are sources of too much saturated fat. They are full of saturated fat. And they are at the top of the new pyramid. The first thing you see on the left is a piece of steak. There's whole milk, whole yogurt, all the stuff that's full of saturated fat right there at the top. But they say to reduce saturated fat, but you should eat this stuff. This is the biggest problem with these new guidelines, other than the fact that there's no science in them, is that it contradicts itself. Don't eat saturated fat, but eat these foods that are full of saturated fat. What is the big deal with fat anyway? Fat by itself is not bad. We need fat. Our bodies need fat. But saturated fat is bad. Unsaturated fat is good. Saturated fat tends to be stuff that is solid at room temperature, like butter. The unsaturated fat of things like olive oils, avocados, those things are unsaturated and actually really good for us. The alternative to using butter and beef tallow is olive oil, which everyone says is great, but then also seed oils, which for some reason people are demonizing now. They're favoring beef tallow and they're saying seed oils are bad. The science does not back that up. We're just going to have to wait another 4 years for the next one to come out, and hopefully it will course correct a little bit better. And in the meantime, there is enough good stuff in this document that people can make good choices. But unfortunately, some of this fitness fad stuff about beef tallow being good and seed oil being bad is in there, and that's not ideal. So seed oils are fine. I will link citations for all of this so you can kind of follow the science yourself as you like to. I think the whole point of this is that we need to remember that there's a reason that science exists for, especially nutrition, because it's constantly changing. We need people constantly looking at the new research and making decisions based on that, not based on what they want to be, but based on what is, if that makes sense. I feel like this new document is based on what one person wants it to be, and it's not based on what the science says it should be. That's not a great thing if one person's making that decision for the entire country. So I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'd love to have a discussion about this in the comments section. I know there's going to be some strong opinions about this, but let's try to keep it as civil as possible. And as usual, stay healthy.